Bring the meeting to order of the Wilmington City Council. I'd like to welcome all those who are with us here this evening and all those who are watching us from home. Thank you for taking an interest in your government. At this time, I'd like to call on Councilmember Clifford Barnett to do the invocation. If everyone will stand and remain standing afterwards for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Eternal Father, we pause to say thank you. Thank you for your protection. Thank you for your guidance. Thank you for electing even members of the City Council. We pray that as those of us who have been chosen, may we serve you. We pray now that you'll bless us as we do the work that has been assigned for this day to do. May what we do put a smile on your face. For it's in his name we pray. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First, I would like to say congratulations to Councilmember Barnett and Councilmember Ravenbark for their win yesterday, and also for the newcomer that will be also joining us, Mr. Luke Waddell. Very spirited campaigns, and I know that we're all glad they're over.
And I'd like to say congratulations to Mayor Sappho for being
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. So at this time, we have several presentations this evening. Presentation recognizing the sponsors of the Wilmington Tree Initiative. I also want to just mention on the Tree Initiative, to date, the city has received $76,000 in sponsorship funds with the goal of planting trees in Wilmington. And tonight we are here to thank and acknowledge our sponsors that have donated $5,000 or more for the initiative. And we also want to give a very special thanks to Mary Ellen Golden, who is providing the artwork for our plaques. The Tree Initiative has been a work of love for all of us up here. We've heard from our community and from our citizens that we needed to do more to protect trees, but also more to plant trees in the community. And we have asked the private sector to step up and help us with this initiative. And they have stepped forward and have donated money and time, a lot of volunteers that come forward. And every time we have a tree planting event anywhere in the city, I can tell you there's hundreds of volunteers that come forward. We may be able to plant hundreds of trees within an hour or two just by the volunteers that come forward. And I think today we've planted over 4,166 trees. And that's in the first year of the initiative. And the initiative's goal was to plant 1,739, and 1,739 is the date that the city of Wilmington was incorporated. And one of the goals of the initiative is to really plant trees in the public realm, in the public right-of-ways, in the areas that we control or government controls in some way, shape, or form, including schools, universities, the Department of Transportation, and the city of Wilmington, the county of New Hanover. So I just want to say thank you to all of the partners that have been part of this initiative. I think it's fabulous, and this is something that will be ongoing for years to come. A lot of people don't know this, but about 2 years ago, the city of Wilmington conducted a survey of our tree canopy, and our tree canopy, believe it or not, is at 48%. Obviously, we like to be over the 50% mark, and of course, we've lost a lot of trees due to development, as well as hurricanes and storm-related events. But this initiative will be an ongoing thing for this community for years to come, and we're very proud of the initiative, and we're very proud of all of the folks that have come forward to help us. So at this time, I'm going to come to the front and I'll be passing out the plaques to the different companies and individuals that have been very instrumental in making this initiative a success for our community. So, Madam Clerk. First award goes to Mark Moraz with Live Oak Bank. Mark, here's Mark. And I just want to recognize Live Oak Bank for their contribution of over $10,000 to the initiative. So Mark, thank you on behalf of Live Oak Bank. Next award goes to Pam Hardy with Duke Energy Progress, also donated $10,000 to the initiative. Thank you. Dr. Philip Brown with Novant Health and New Hanover Regional Medical Center. Jason Swain with Swain and Associates. Come on up here. Corey Douglas and Rob Bridges with Clancy and Thays. Livian Jones with Roy Carroll II, Enterprises. And then Shane Hefferman with Audi Cape Fear. They were our first tree initiative sponsor. They provided a tree for each car sold and trees on one section of Racine Drive with the courtesy of Audi Cape Fear. Shane, come on up. I think you guys sold about 100 trees out there. Okay, we have Robert Clayton, Matthew Mercer, Ingrid Chuckalas with Verizon, participated in tree giveaway of 500 trees in 2019. The next giveaway sponsored by Verizon will be 1,000 trees on November the 13th, and after the November giveaway, thanks to Verizon, 1,546 trees will have been planted in Wilmington via giveaways to citizens and plantings on public property. Come on up here. Way to go, guys. And then the last one is to Connie Park and the Alliance for Cape Fear Trees for being a key partner on the tree initiative and for the commitment and passion for helping to grow the urban forest in Wilmington, North Carolina. Connie, come on up. Give them another big hand. These folks did a tremendous job for our community. Thank you. Thank you. Our next item of business is a presentation, Commission for Women Annual Report. And at this time, I'd like to recognize Ms. Sheila Evans, who is the chairperson of that commission. Sheila, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Saffo, Mayor Potem Haynes, council members, I'm Sheila Evans. I am the chair of the New Hanover County Council for Women. I am joined by one of my fellow committee members in the peach sweater. Here to give you a real quick basic update. Our first meeting was June 25th, 2020. Due to COVID, it was hybrid. After that, pretty much just virtual. Therefore, we decided to educate ourselves on what was going on in the community, different speakers, different groups, to include the executive director of the North Carolina Council for Women, Women Organizing Women, League of Women Voters of the Lower Cape Fear, the Downtown Rotary. We had NC House State Representative Deb Butler join us, the Junior League of Wilmington, the Wilmington Encouragement Living and Learning Place, the American Association of University Women. We were joined by someone from the North Side Co-op, Health Equity Outreach from New Hanover Regional Medical Center, ERA NC Alliance, the Globe Principal, Kate Talo, and one of the social workers, Janet Tucker. And one of the more fascinating guests that we had was someone who served on the committee years ago. She served 2 terms in a leadership role, Dolores Williams. And we met in person. She joined us, kind of filled us in on what it was like back then, and that really inspired us and got us moving a bit. We did host a healthcare town hall meeting in March 2021. We sponsored the International Women's Day from UNCW's Department of Education. Commissioner Hayes requested that she meet with the chair. She and I met and agreed to do so quarterly. I did extend the same offer to Mayor Pro Tem Haynes last week to see if you wanted to catch up at some point. We had our first in-person work session at the Willowdale Urban Farm. It was awesome to be together, be outside and meet and share some ideas. Then we were lucky enough to have a massive amount of historical documents. We did lose some due to just the aging of some of the information, but we were actually able to read the minutes from the very first meeting years ago. We dumped all this stuff out on a table, gave us some ideas. One of the things that came out of that was they actually had a logo, a New Hanover County Commission for Women logo. Needed to be updated, so one of our members decided that we should have a logo contest. It's been promoted at GLOW, the after-school program at the Y, and some other areas that I'm not entirely sure of. The deadline for that submission is December 17th. We were in the planning stages of an October BizMix networking event, but we have postponed that to spring 2022 due to the variant. We acknowledged Women's Equity Day by securing a resolution calling for the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment from the New Hanover County Commissioners. We supported the Domestic Violence Council by endorsing their letter to request continual virtual domestic protective order filings with the DA's office. We worked with the Office of Diversity and Equity. Some of us attended the intentional collisions held at Airlie Gardens, and then several of us personally sponsored and attended the first Equity Awards Ball. We supported and advocated the YWCA's Week Without Violence. We spent some time advocating for the exploration for a commission of women in some of the neighboring counties. There are actually only 5 commissions for women across the state, so we are lucky enough to have one here. We are currently working on a woman's pulse survey so that we can get firsthand data on the needs of women in the community. We did volunteer to register voters. We have a couple featured speakers already on the calendar. Tracy Newkirk will be joining us representing the African American Business Council, and we have Natalie English with the Chamber. We also have been approached, specifically Bridget in the audience here, about cyber bullying, cyber stalking, and we will be, we already have somebody on the calendar from the Sheriff's Department, and I'm working on Wilmington PD. And lastly, last month, we created an award called the Inspiration Award, and we had our inaugural recognition of Tamara Tai Young, who just recently retired from the WNBA. I would like to add, before there are any comments or anything, that just yesterday, Ms. Sidbury shared with me bylaws that I did not have that were city bylaws. I only had the county bylaws. So today I acted on updating the calendar. That was a responsibility I was not aware that we were supposed to have. So I thank Ms. Sidbury for that, and they're mostly congruent. There were just a couple little things that were a little bit different, and I'm acting on those. Thank you.
Thank you. Good work, Sheila. Appreciate it. Thank you. Next presentation is a proclamation remembering the 1898 massacre and coup, and I will be making a presentation and proclamation to Evelyn Bryan, who is the chairwoman of the Commission on African American History. Proclamation reads on behalf of the city of Wilmington, remembering the 1898 massacre and coup. Whereas 123 years ago, on November the 8th, 1898, after a lengthy statewide white supremacy campaign, the city of Wilmington experienced a contested election, followed by a massacre and a coup d'etat on November the 10th, 1898. Whereas the massacre left an unknowable number of residents dead, with the death toll estimates ranging from less than 10 people to hundreds of people. And whereas the coup replaced our local multiracial governmental bodies with white-only legislators. Whereas this change in leadership led to the firing of African-American city and county employees such as firefighters and police officers. And whereas local white supremacist leaders' actions forced African-Americans and whites out of the city in the wake of the massacre and coup. And whereas these events left deep scars in our community, disenfranchised African-American men, and helped spread legally sanctioned race-based segregation in the city of Wilmington and the state of North Carolina. And whereas these events shaped the city's race relations in deleterious ways for generations. And whereas the city of Wilmington declares that providing an accurate historical information about the massacre and coup is critical to our community's healing and moving forward. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the mayor of the city of Wilmington, the month of November will be recognized as a period of mourning, commemoration, and reflection for all members of our community. Residents are urged to learn the history of the 1898 massacre and coup d'etat, to mourn those whose lives were lost during 1898, to remember the resiliency of the African American community in the wake of the violence, and are encouraged to reflect on ways they can make our community a better place for all. I want to say thank you, Evelyn, to your committee and to your group for doing this. This is very important for our communities to recognize this history, and I know that now in Tulsa, Oklahoma, they're talking about doing what we've started many years ago by building a monument and also recognizing what happened in Tulsa with the Black Street massacre that took place there. So on behalf of the city of Wilmington, I hereby give you the proclamation, and I know you have a few words to say.
Thank you, Mayor Sappho, council members, city staff members. On behalf of the City of Wilmington's Commission on African American History, and in partnership with New Hanover County, 1898 Observance Committee, and community partners, I'd like to take this opportunity to express how amazing it has been for me, someone who was born and raised in the city of Wilmington, and was never taught or heard about 1898 massacre until I returned home in 1991. My hope is that the upcoming events will raise awareness, educate, and embed in us that we are all created equal. We may look different, but we all bleed the same blood. So I encourage everyone to join us for the following events. Thursday, November the 4th at 9 a.m., the clergy brunch and prayer vigil will be held at Martin Luther King Center by the Wilmington Ministerial Alliance. Friday, November the 5th, from 6 to 8 p.m., there will be a virtual event, an intimate session on race and reconciliation by none other than the granddaughter of the Durham civil rights activist, Anne Nakia Green, and author of The Best of Enemies, O'Shea Gray Davidson. 2 p.m. Saturday, November the 6th, at the 1898 Memorial Park, held by the New Hanover County Community Remembrance Project, will display soil samples from locations where Black residents were slaughtered by a white mob. The ceremony will recognize the known and unknown victims, survivors, and descendants from both groups. Following the ceremony on November the 6th, a funeral procession and graveside memorial service will be held in memory of the late Joshua Halsey, who was killed during the massacre. Halsey's gravesite is the first to be located of the 1898 victims, which is a notable discovery made by the Third Person Project. Beginning at 3:15 p.m., a horse-drawn carriage with the soil samples identifying Halsey will begin a procession from the corner of 6th and Bladen Streets down Red Cross Street to the Pine Forest Cemetery. Descendants of the Halsey family will be in attendance, along with state, local leaders, and a graveside eulogy will be held by Reverend Dr. William Barber II. The community is encouraged to line the streets for the funeral procession, and WECT will live stream the procession and graveside service on its social media page and on WECT.com. Tuesday, November the 9th, Cape Fear Museum, 4:30 p.m., showing of the Red Cape. Wednesday, November the 10th, 12 noon, Reverend Dr. Kirk State Marker ceremony will be held at 3rd and Red Cross Street. November the 10th, 6:30, the Unity service at Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church will be held, and the keynote speaker will be none other than Dr. Ben Chavis. For more information, look at the city and the county's website, and please reach out by calling 798-7430. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you very much. Great presentation. Next item of business is our consent agenda, items 1 through 8. Are there any items that any council member would like to hear separately? If not, what are the wishes of council? We have a motion to approve by Councilmember O'Grady, second by Councilmember Barnett.
Can you pull C4 for me?
Yes, sir. So we'll look at approving the agenda C1 through C8, excluding C4. There was a motion by Kevin O'Grady, second by Councilmember Clifford Barnett. Any further discussion? All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item passes unanimously. At this time, I'd like to recognize Councilmember Kevin Spears. Mr. Spears?
Can you tell me how long ago it was where we handled these in-house, this auction, or anything that any material that surplus or confiscated?
Could we have our city staff answer that question, please?
I don't know that anybody, Jennifer, I don't know that anybody on staff has been here since we've done that.
So it's been that long?
Yes, sir. I know that ever since I've been here, which has been 13 years, it has been done on GovDeals. We just got recognized by GovDeals as one of their top 7 sellers in the nation. So we do pretty well through the process, but I can't tell you the last time we did it privately.
Good. I just wanted to know because, I mean, it's competitive. It's very competitive. And you may think you're going to win, but at that very last moment, it's out of there.
It's just like a private sale out there, yeah.
But I only thought about it because you would think if we still did it here, how it could benefit some people in our community compared to people who are probably really, really skilled at getting these cards online. So that was my only thought.
I'll be glad to have an offline conversation with you. We had a policy before that allowed some of those vehicles to go some of the nonprofit agencies, but I'll be glad to have an offline discussion with you about that.
Okay, let's do that. All right. I'll make a motion for C4.
Okay, we have a motion made by Councilmember Spears, second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously. That brings us to our next item of business, which is our public information segment. We have 4 speakers that have signed up to speak with us this evening. Each speaker will be allotted 5 minutes. The first speaker is Mr. Travis Mickle, Fronting Life Local Nonprofit Recovery and Community Organization. Mr. Travis Mickle? Is Mr. Travis Mickle here? Okay. Not seeing Mr. Mickle. My next speaker is Mr. Michael Smith, who will be speaking to us about HPC resolution. Smith?
Good evening, members of City Council. My name is Michael Smith. As one of your Historic Preservation Commission members, I'm here representing and expressing the wishes of the Historic Preservation Commission, which voted unanimously on September 9th, 2021, to draft and adopt a resolution to encourage you as members of City Council to pursue special legislation for the stays of demolition for historic buildings outside of the local designated historic districts. Our decision comes from our commitment as a body to preservation in the city of Wilmington. It is my belief that we are the eyes and the ears for protecting our architectural resources and sites and share those concerns with you when appropriate. That is what this resolution does. Preservationists must constantly be looking forward, analyzing ways to protect significant properties. In our request, we, the members of the HPC, feel this resolution is important to protect potential properties at risk. As this issue is important to us, it is our hope that you, as council members, will consider our request as important to the city of Wilmington. In the drafting of the new 2021 Land Development Code, stay of demolition for properties outside of designated districts was stricken from the new code, and in fact had not been enforced for some time, as the city does not have the authority to enforce a stay of demolition for properties outside of designated historic districts. However, with special legislation specific to Wilmington, such protection can occur. The HPC feels it is our responsibility to bring attention to this gap in protection of properties. This resolution is not designed to target property owners or unfairly attack developers. It is simply to have in place a pause button, so to speak, in the form of a stay of demolition, to seek and engage in conversation with the property owner to look at options to save a property. There is no single tool that will solve the problems of teardowns, but rather a combination of strategies works most effectively. Demolition delays are only one tool, but to remove them from protection in certain areas of the city as an instrument of historic preservation would make saving old buildings that much more difficult. As part of our role as commissioners, we are mandated to prepare and recommend the official adoption of a preservation element as part of the local government's comprehensive plan, and to negotiate at any time with the owner of a building, structure, site, or area, or object for its acquisition and its preservation when such action is reasonably necessary or appropriate under state statutes. There are 5 cities in North Carolina who have attempted to obtain special legislation to protect their vulnerable properties. They are Cary, Chapel Hill, Wake Forest, Wilson, and Apex. Each city's journey and outcome is different in their pursuit of this special legislation. While conducting my research and talking with the historic planners in some of these cities, of the ones who successfully accomplished obtaining this legislation, They all expressed to me how proud they were to have done so. As Wilmington holds the admiration of many other cities across our state, given our inventory and commitment to preservation, so many of the planners spoke with me and fully understood our desire to protect our vulnerable properties. Even well-known cities like Charleston and Savannah are constantly looking forward and adopting new ways to ensure the safety and protection for contributing structures and neighborhoods. In conclusion, let me borrow this comment from the State Preservation Office. The heritage of our state, and indeed our cities, is one of our most valuable and important assets. The conservation and preservation of the historic district, overlays, and landmarks stabilize and increase property values and strengthen the overall economy of the state and local communities. Without stay of demolition protection for properties or sites outside of the designated historic district, it will substantially weaken the HPC's ability to use the demolition delay tool to save historic properties and sites. Please reaffirm Wilmington's commitment to preservation by approving and advancing our request. Please ensure that Wilmington joins these other cities who successfully adopted this legislation while proving what a leader Wilmington is in preservation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before I recognize the next speaker, I do want to recognize two individuals that are in the audience, and I meant to mention their names. On item C7, which is the resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with the Northside Food Co-op to provide food distribution to residents within an area identified as a food desert, I want to recognize Evan Fold and Sierra Washington. This group of individuals and citizens and volunteers have been working diligently to help in this really significant issue that we're dealing with until we get a grocery store on the north side. But I just want to recognize their efforts and everything they have done. And obviously, we were able to obtain funding from the ARPA funding to be able to distribute to them and to help them with this endeavor. And I just want to applaud your efforts and say thank you very much on behalf of the citizens of this community for doing that. And just say thank you, and we're here to help and work with you folks. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Travis Gilbert, Historic Wilmington Foundation. Will be talking to us about demolition delay for historic buildings. Travis, welcome.
Good evening. I think congratulations are in order, Mr. Rivenbark, Mr. Barnett, Mr. Mayor. I'm Travis Gilbert, Executive Director at the Historic Wilmington Foundation. I'm here this evening to extend our organization's support for pursuing special legislation to delay the demolition of contributing resources outside local historic districts, but within the National Register historic districts. It's important to know that there are two types of historic districts, overlays, or landmarks in our community. Our local historic districts, landmarks, and overlays that are regulated by the Historic Preservation Commission. This evening, we are speaking of the gray area outside of those local historic districts, but yet within National Register historic districts. There are 8 said federal districts within our community. These demolition delays within National Register historic districts are important preservation tools to revitalize downtown Wilmington and continue the economic prosperity of our community. There is a problem within these National Register historic districts. HWF over the past few months has undertaken an informal survey of our National Register historic districts. We've looked particularly the past few months at the north side of Wilmington. This is defined as north of Market Street, outside of the local historic districts, but within the Wilmington National Register historic district. Think everything from about 8th Street to the river, Market Street up to MLK. We found 542 structures in this informal survey. 481 remain today, 58 no longer exist, and 2 were just undetermined. This is a rate of about 10.7% of demolition since the last survey in 2003. One of the worst attrition rates occurred on North 4th Street, where only 10 of 25 contributing structures remain. That's a decrease of 60-some%. These figures remind us that our build history is being demolished at an alarming rate within the Wilmington National Register Historic District. Now, preserving these resources is very important to the growth of our communities and the revitalization of downtown Wilmington. Only structures listed as contributing on the Wilmington National Register Historic District, or the 7 others in our city, or individually listed on the National Register, are eligible for the federal and state historic preservation tax credits. These tax credits, they provide jobs, they bolster the tax base by revitalizing existing buildings and our infrastructure while preserving our city's irreplaceable historic character. Just for example, North 4th Street, where that 66% decrease occurred, saw a $603,000 private investment into a 1903 building when Lighthouse Films revitalized that structure on North 4th Street. Since this federal tax credit's inception, New Hanover County has accrued $42 million worth of eligible private investment. Since the state tax credit's inception, we've accrued about $14 million. This is private investment in our community that only occurs when we maintain the historic and architectural integrity of our National Register Historic Districts. Now, finally, it's important for HWF as a collaborative partner of the City of Wilmington. Might I remind you, we all work together on North 4th Street to preserve the old Presbyterian church that is now revitalized as the Brooklyn Arts Center. I believe that was during Mr. Reibenbach's term. By pursuing this demolition delay, you do three things to help us collaborate. First of all, we can work with the property owners to negotiate, using our endowment, a sale of the property or some type of alternative like moving a structure away. We just did that in 2018. We moved a structure from the 300 block of Bladen Street to North 4th Street, where that 66% decrease occurred, and it just opened last week as a restaurant. It's thriving up there across from Pallet. Those are the types of powers and tools that you allow occur if we have some time to hit the pause button and consider what alternatives to demolition may occur as we collaborate with our partners at the city. Now, if we cannot negotiate an alternative, we can at least document the structure for future historians to understand what we have lost, and use our incredible team that Dolores Williams helped create and is now at Deb Helms behind Stevens Hardware, called Legacy Architectural Salvage. Right now, we're unable to find an alternative to the demolition of Shandy Hall, and we've been working for the past 3 weeks to save and salvage architectural materials and old-growth wood. Those are irreplaceable historic resources that will not end up in the landfill, will end up contributing to other preservation projects in our community that can only occur with time. So on behalf of the Historic Wilmington Foundation, I urge you to continue this progress towards a demolition delay in our Wilmington National Register Historic District, so we can work as a collaborative partner of the City of Wilmington to preserve our build history. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker and last speaker is Ms. Susan Shaloub, who is going to be speaking to us about thanks for efforts of city stormwater personnel. Susan, welcome.
Good evening. My name is Susan Shaloub, and I live in Sunset South. I'm the chair of our Stormwater Committee. A couple of our board members were concerned that some folks were going to come here to complain about flooding, and I just wanted to voice my thanks for all of the efforts that have been made very recently, as well as over the years, to address the flooding problems. There have been improvements, and just today a project started to do some major repairs on stormwater pipes within Adams Street that are believed to contribute to sinkholes. And so a shout out to engineers Beckner and Royal especially, as well as the folks that come around with the big trucks. And so if you do hear some complaints, we have flooding everywhere in the city, but our flooding has improved in the streets, and we're crossing our fingers for the next storm. And even during the hurricane, the city pumped out all the excess water in the pipes. I believe it took about 2 weeks to do that. So, you know, there has been a lot of work on the system within the city's responsibility. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you. Next item of business are public hearings. First item is PH1, which is an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city of Wilmington to rezone property located at 712, 714, 718, 722, and 724 Wellington Avenue from CS Commercial Services to ONI 1 Office and Institutional District. At this time, I'd like to recognize City Manager, Mr. Tony Caudle. Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Patrick O'Mahony, Associate Planner, will overview this item for us.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. The site location is currently the Apostolic Tabernacle Church, which is on the southwest corner of Wellington Avenue and Wonder Way. The site includes 6 parcels. It contains approximately 2.39 acres. The image before you shows the site in the context of the surrounding area. And this slide illustrates the existing conditions of the subject properties. Adjacent properties are primarily office and institutional land uses. ONI 1 zoning is located directly to the east and south, and CS, commercial services zoning, is located to the north and west of the subject properties. As I said, the area includes a mix of commercial, office, and institutional land uses. The applicant has requested to rezone the site from CS commercial services to ONI 1 office and institutional district. A list of uses are in your case summary comparing the CS and ONI districts, and that's in attachment 5. The site's located within a suburban commercial retrofit area of opportunity, an urban mixed-use center, and along a special character street. The comprehensive plan calls for compatible infill development and redevelopment and supports retrofitting commercial sites and buildings. The proposed ONI zoning would be consistent with the surrounding area and the surrounding zoning and is generally less intense than the existing CS zoning district. It would also allow for uses that are more compatible with the surrounding area. Staff believes the request is consistent with the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan and is reasonable and in the public interest and recommends approval. Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of this request at their October 6th meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions. I did not see the applicant here, but they may have come in later after I did. So.
Do we have any questions for staff? Okay.
Great.
Thank you, sir. Just up. Okay, now, plane went over. At this time, I'd like to recognize, is the applicant here? Yes, sir. Step forward and state your name for the record, please, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Larry St. Clair. I'm one of the Board of Directors of the church, and I'm just here to hear the vote.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
This time I'm going to open the public hearing and ask if anyone in the public wishes to speak on item PH1. Seeing none, are there any, Madam Clerk, have we received any notification? None? Okay, thank you. Okay. Are there any further questions from council? Okay, hearing none, I will close the public hearing and ask for the wishes of council, and I will note that whoever makes the motion must read a consistency statement and reasonable statement for the record.
Excuse me. I move to approve the proposed amendment to rezone property located at 712, 714, 718, 722, and 724 Wellington Avenue from CS Commercial Services to ONI-1 Office and Institutional District 1, and find it to be consistent with the relevant policies in the comprehensive plan based on the application materials and the information provided at the public hearing and in the staff report, and to find approval of the rezoning request is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The proposed rezoning would allow for the reuse and redevelopment of the site that is more consistent and compatible with the existing development pattern along Wellington Avenue and the surrounding area.
Okay, so we have a motion by Councilman Rivenbark, second by Councilmember Anderson. Consistent statement has been read. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes, second by Councilmember O'Grady. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to the next item of business, which is item PH2, which is an ordinance amending the new Land Development Code, Chapter 18, set to become effective on December 1st, 2021, by cleaning up language related to ground floor residential uses in the CBD, standards for optimal building height increases in the O&I, RB, LI, and industrial districts, electronic changeable copy on signs, unipole wireless telecommunication facilities, appeals language, and loading standards. At this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Ms. Tony Caudle. Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Christine Hughes, our senior planner, will review this item for us.
Good evening. As we promised, when we went through the Land Development Code rewrite process, we would be constantly aware of how the code is working and what, if any, changes need to be made along the way. And what we have before you tonight is the initial code cleanup that will allow some changes to be made before the code becomes effective very soon on December 1st. There are 6 amendments proposed. The first is to restore the prohibition on ground floor residential uses along the Riverwalk and on portions of Front Street and Water Street, to correct the standards for optional building height increase in the RB, O&I, LI, and IND districts, to clarify in which zoning districts electronic changeable copy signs are actually prohibited, to define unipole and clarify that they are permitted wireless telecommunication facilities, to change the timeline for appeals to align with statutory language, and to add back text that was inadvertently omitted from the document that was adopted in August. Currently, in our current code, there is a prohibition on ground floor residential uses in certain parts of the central business district, and the intention was to carry that forward into the new code, and we did. However, when it got reformatted, the formatting of the document makes it a little unclear where that applies, and it could be interpreted that it would only apply in the downtown core. So this amendment would clarify that ground floor residential uses would be prohibited anywhere along the Riverwalk and also prohibited on the ground floor fronting Water Street and Front Street, anywhere in the CBD. So here you see the proposed change there. And again, that would just clarify that it doesn't matter which of those character areas the property is located in. It would be an across-the-board regulation. And that standard is in the current code, and it came about in 2008 when we did some amendments to the CBD regulations. Next is the restoration of, or I guess the addition of some missing elements for optional building height increase. In the office and institutional, regional business, light industrial, and industrial districts, there is the option to increase the building height with enhanced site design standards, namely stepping back the building above a certain height. The diagrams included in the document correctly illustrate how that would work. However, the text of the code has an inadvertent loophole, so this would close that loophole. And the change that's proposed is the same in the RB and O&I standards and in the LI and industrial district standards. And it would just clarify that those standards for step backs are required across the board.
Just curious on the step back, and I understand on the RB and O&I, since you do have more street frontage on those, but in the industrial and light industrial areas was kind of more of an industrial area. Why the step back there? If somebody's trying to maximize some
Sure,
kind of a warehouse or something along those lines.
It is unusual to have exceptionally tall buildings in the industrial districts that, I can't think of any that are really that tall. The idea behind it is that light and air would be preserved between the buildings if you do have exceptionally tall buildings, and it would only be on the front and side lot lines, so not on the rear lot line, unless it's adjacent to single-dwelling residential, and in that case, it would apply to any shared lot lines.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So again, it's the same standard proposed for both sections there. The next change would be to clarify where electronic changeable copy signs are prohibited. And again, this is very in keeping with the current code language. The new code doesn't identify where these signs are prohibited. And we would propose to add back that same restriction that they would be prohibited in the UMX, Historic District Residential, Historic District, and Historic District Mixed Use districts, and then in any historic district overlay. I'm having trouble with the mouse tonight, I'm sorry about that. The next change proposed is related to wireless telecommunication facilities. Unipole towers and monopole towers are currently permitted, but this change would actually clarify that unipole towers are permitted, and that's the image that you see on the left, where all of the equipment is fully internal to the tower. The image in the center is a monopole, also permitted, and you see the equipment is on the outside of the tower. And then all the way on the right is a palm, I guess that's a fake palm tree, where the tower is meant to mimic a tree, and those are not permitted, and that would not be changing. We did intend that unipole towers be permitted, but because we didn't define them and we didn't specifically say that they're permitted, we wanted to go ahead and clarify that, and then add some definitions for further clarification to define unipole and to clarify what a wireless, what a stealth tower is.
Can I just ask a question? The first two are permitted, the third
Yes.
one is not.
Correct, that's right.
Thanks.
And then the appeals language, this change would just more closely align the Land Development Code language with the statutory language. And primarily it's related to the date, how long someone has to appeal, and it's from the written notice of determination. And so we would be adding that written notice into the code language and correcting the statutory reference. And finally, if you can remember back to over the summer and the version of the document that you received during your work sessions, this text was complete. However, I made a mistake in editing the document that was actually adopted in August, and some of the text is missing. You see it just ends with a hyphen there, and the rest of the sentence is missing. The text box got cut out. So this change would restore that missing text to have complete standards for loading and just restore the same text that was in the work session version of the document. And that is the text that is missing. The Planning Commission voted to recommend approval of these changes, and staff also recommends approval of these changes as we believe they are reasonable and in the public interest. And as we're the applicant, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have on these.
Mr. Rivenbark?
Excuse me. Christine, I talked to Ron and Catherine today about this, and I want to make sure I'm real clear on this. Is there
Yes, sir.
anything that an applicant could have, and bear with me because I don't know even how to ask the question, is there something that someone could have applied for or tried to do in the meantime before we adopt this or add this language that would allow them to bypass these cleanup?
Not that I am aware. The current code is in effect until the new code is in effect,
So forgive me for interrupting. So what we're doing here tonight is no different than what's already in the code?
For the changes to the CBD regulations, the electronic changeable copy signs, that's an exact carry forward of the current code.
Okay. How about the others?
The loading standards are very similar to the current
Okay.
code. And then as with the wireless telecommunication facilities, and I'm trying my best to remember.
That's not the one that I'm, move on.
Sure,
What's
okay.
the next one?
And then the appeals language, because it's statutory, even if it is incorrect in the current code, the statutes would override that.
And the ground floor?
That is a carryover of the current code. So the ground floor residential uses are currently prohibited. So I don't think that anybody could get around that today because that's a current code standard.
So just so from your lips to my ears, somebody that there's not any downtime where they could have just reasonably wanted to do something and then this is going to prohibit it. It's already prohibited.
It's currently prohibited, yes, sir.
And has been?
It has been since at least 2008.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. I'm going to open up the public hearing and ask if anybody in the public wishes to speak on this item. Please come forward. You can state your name for the record. It's
Susan Tyson. Good evening, Mayor. I'm really nervous. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Susan Tyson, and my husband Skip and I are one of the owners of the Riverwalk condos located at 224 and also the 212 Water Street. I'm talking about the ground floor, what you just referenced. We've owned this property for almost 17 years, so from 2004, and I believe this amendment will negatively affect mine and all the other units on the property. It says residential uses shall be prohibited on the ground floor fronting Riverwalk. North Orange Street, residential uses shall be prohibited on the ground floor fronting Water and Front Streets. There are currently, and we're talking the Riverwalk condos that are right there by Pilot House and Elijah's, there are currently 14 ground floor Riverwalk units. At least 9 of those are currently being used as residential. And I look back at the records, and the tax records, May 21st of this year, one of them had gotten changed from commercial to residential, and 4 or 5 of them, August of 2020, got changed from commercial to residential. And some other ones are still being used as residential there. By condemning the property to only commercial use, it puts our property owners at a competitive disadvantage. I'm wondering if this is spot zoning just for us down there. It seems to me that it's taking away our property rights to be able to decide what it is. It's in the central business district and has always been able to be used as commercial or residential. It has never been enforced that I've known. I mean, again, it's been changed in the last year and a half down there. The property owners were not notified of this zoning amendment, and I actually just found out about this meeting last night at about 11:30. And so we haven't had time to gather information for even an educated conversation about this. So I respectfully ask today to delay the vote until the property owners, the HOA, and we can find some legal counsel to help and review us with this. Thank you.
Ms. Tyson, have you, this is the first you've heard of this item?
This amendment, correct?
This amendment?
Yep.
Okay, and did you hear about it today?
I heard about it at 11:30 last night.
Okay, have you had an opportunity to speak to anybody in the city staff or city planning in respect, or in regards to this amendment?
Well, this has sort of been an ongoing thing. I don't want to make it real long, but I had owned the Wilmington Tea Room down there, and I started it 17 years ago, and sold the business, and that person didn't run it for too long, and in turn, I leased it out to someone else, retail, and it's really hard when you have that small of a space, and it's worth so much to make anything happen down there. And when COVID hit, they were out. So I sold one of my units, and the wonderful lady, I've never actually spoken with her, but was planning on making it a residential unit like more than half of them down there. And she got a no from the city that she couldn't make it residential, it's zoned commercial. But we looked into it, and there are several that are zoned residential in the city central, I don't know all this lingo, but it just doesn't seem fair that some are and some aren't. And again, I saw where it said 2008, but it has been changed since, and it's ongoing down there. So I just don't know what to do until we get some help.
Mr. Ravenborough?
Help.
Yes, I appreciate you coming down, and don't be nervous. But I think at this point, I'd like for Ms. Hughes to come back up. Don't go far.
Okay.
You can sit right there in the front chair right there.
Can you perhaps shed some light on what they're talking about? Some are, some aren't, and is there any non-conforming uses that would be allowed?
There are some legal non-conforming residential uses that predated the 2008 code change. We did look for any permits issued last year for conversion to see if a permit was issued in error, and we cannot find any record of any permits being issued for recent conversions. So if somebody did convert it, we don't, in 2020 or 2021, we do not have record of that.
But the ones that were used as residential prior to what year?
2008.
Prior to 2008, they would be allowed to continue?
They would be allowed to continue, yes, sir.
And that, Mrs. Tyson, that doesn't apply to you in your situation?
No, because mine was, my 2 units were zoned commercial, and when we sold it, the buyer had actually even heard from the city that it was okay to make it residential. And when I looked today and found it, you go to the property tax records, I'm figuring out how to do this, and then you look under the unit, and then you can, where it says residential, and then you go over, and where it says residential and report, it has it down in the reports where it got changed from the commercial to residential use. And that's where I found the dates.
Well, the county, I do this all the time too as part of my job, and it'll have what the property is being used for, or the current use. That doesn't necessarily mean it's zoned for that. It's just that's the current use. So I don't know. Christine, you left too quick.
Right, and so, and I know that, again, I've been down there for 17 years, and I've watched some of them go from businesses to residential. I mean, I've been down there and
But
watched.
nobody came down and got a rezoning. They just took it upon themselves
And did it,
to
right?
convert
and
it
then,
to residential.
correct. And then some of them, again, the ones that have been residential for years, just changed the little name on the tax, whatever it is, from, when you look at it, it now says residential, and a year ago, it said commercial. And we're just trying to do the right thing, because I've taken out home equity lines. I mean, when you have a 500 square foot place, and the market value is $330,000, you can't sell T-shirts and pay for that mortgage. Residential is where you can get income. And I understand why the city wants to make the bottom commercial, and because it's great, the Riverwalk's awesome, that's why we have it, but it doesn't work, and it's just not fair.
But just to be clear, what's driving this is not so much the use, but the potential hazard of flooding, or?
In 2008, when that was first added to the code, the intention behind it was to have active pedestrian realm on the Riverwalk. We were getting also a number of complaints from people who lived on the Riverwalk that people were walking along the Riverwalk, being loud, being noisy at all hours, which, you know, it's a pedestrian zone. So, you know, it was a little bit of a conflict between the land uses going on at that time.
Yes, ma'am. So,
And again, we've been there since 2004, and none of the board, none of the HOA, none of the property owners were ever told that this was going to be changed.
so when it got changed in 2008, that's when it became effective?
Right. And I was there.
It's a sticky wicket.
And this is the first time I've ever heard about it, because we were just trying to do the right thing and get and honestly, I had my plumbing and my electrical permit pulled, and work was in progress. And then it was called to my attention, I had a big stop work order. It has to be commercial, so I've had to hire a commercial builder. I've had to have an architect. I mean, the money is just, we don't have it. And we're just trying to do the right thing. That's all.
Ms. Haynes?
I'm sorry.
Well, first of all, I don't think you can put too much stock in what the county tax records say of changing something, because that's not always correct in there. Christine, please don't leave. I do think that other cities, and we've learned from other cities that have allowed residential use on the first floor in any commercial district, that because of just what you're talking about, the financial incentives of that then you no longer have a commercial district, because you can make more money in residential. So I believe that was part of the motivation of doing that. But surely back in 2004, we were sending out notices to property owners about changes.
In 2008, that was about a year-long process, and we had a number of community meetings. I've not met her before, and I wouldn't say that she was part of, I don't know if anyone from the building was specifically part of the process, but we did have an ongoing series of community meetings.
And you have that documented somewhere?
Yes, ma'am.
So what we're voting on tonight is not a change.
Correct. We would carry forward the current code language into the new code.
So this is just maintaining what's here, and it's simply correcting text in the land development code.
Yes, ma'am.
That we've approved. So just to make sure that you understand that we're not changing anything, that this is the way it is and has been for a number of years.
So that makes me lost as how people have done things.
Well, because not everybody follows the rules.
I know, and I'm a rule follower, and that's what's hard, and it frightens me that it's with doing this. They will say there will be no new rezonings to these districts. So I don't know what all of the property owners down there are going to do that are currently using it as residential.
Well, some of them are grandfathered in. It sounds as if. So I suggest that I get what you're talking about, and I'm concerned for you, but I suggest that you we're not approving anything new
Right,
tonight.
yes, correct.
Okay, so we could go ahead and approve this. You need to get with Christine, and you guys figure out who's grandfathered in, maybe your grandfather, I don't know, find out what's really going on here, but what we're doing tonight does not negatively impact you any more than you feel you already are. We're not changing anything.
It's always been there since 2008.
Right.
We're just cleaning up some language,
Exactly.
not further restricting you, but just cleaning up the language. So there may be a possibility that you or some of your neighbors may be able to continue to operate it residentially. Is that a fair statement, Christine?
It's certainly possible, yes.
Okay. And some may not, and that's regretful, but it's been on the books for 13 years.
Right. Just get with Christine. She knows what she's doing, and she'll try to walk you through it and see if there's some way around whatever. So you can be a rule follower, and it can work out for you, hopefully.
Can I ask a quick question? Are many of them divided? Are they all the same, like up and down? I mean, I know some,
They were all-
originally a lot of them were residential upstairs and businesses down, I mean, as I recall. And I guess what you're saying is it's transitioned away from that for a variety of reasons, including the economy at certain times.
Right.
To residential up and down in all these places.
On the bottom ones, that was La Cantalon, that is being, somebody else is doing something in there, and that one is 2 units. And then there's only one other unit that's being currently used as a commercial, and that is the water taxis. And everything else is being used as residential. And mine, I'm going to put my office space in there, but if I had money, I would have made it residential 2 years ago and then been grandfathered in, but I didn't know that I could. And the other issue with the commercial that I found is it's also code that commercial with residential above will require a sprinkler system, which is about $20,000 for my 500 square foot place. So again, it's just crushing the property owners.
You would not have been grandfathered in from 2 years ago.
But these
But
people,
that's what you're saying. You just said that. If you had known 2 years ago, you could have done it and you'd be okay.
But people
That really
have.
isn't the case.
oh, no, people have been in the last couple of years changing things.
Yeah, well,
Right.
they may, we don't know. That's why you've got to get with Christine. There are too many unknowns here to solve your problem tonight, okay? I think everybody up here wants you to be successful. We're not trying to do anything to you.
Right, I know.
But Christine can do something for you to try to help you.
I know, thank you.
Mr. Barnett?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty clear. I was going to basically say the same thing that Ms. Margaret said, in that if you did it 2 years ago, it still wouldn't have been legal. You know, so that's the whole deal, that people that do that may have done it, but it wasn't legal at that time.
I know, and they'll get grandfathered.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah, and they're not grandfathered in.
They're
You're
not grandfathered in.
Right.
If they did it illegally, I don't think they're grandfathered in.
Anybody else? Public hearing still open.
They're wrong.
Are there any items, any additional items that were sent to you? Okay. Well. All right. Are there any further questions from council? Seeing none or hearing none, I will close the public hearing and ask for the wishes of council. And I would also note that whoever makes the motion must read a consistent statement for the record, which is you, Mr. Barnett.
Yes. I move to approve the adoption of this first set of housekeeping amendments to the new Land Development Code and find it to be consistent with the relevant policies in the comprehensive plan, based on the application materials and the information provided at the public hearing and in the staff report. And the final approval of the rezoning request is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The proposed amendments will clean up errors in the code in advance of the effective date of the code.
Okay. All right. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Rivenbark, second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to our next item of business, which is item 01, which is an ordinance making supplemental appropriations of $68,400 to the Special Purpose Fund for the donation from Alliance for Cape Fear Trees for the Wilmington Tree Initiative. And at this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Tony Caudill. Mr. Caudill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Marion Doherty, our Community Services Marketing and Media Specialist, will overview the item for us.
Hello.
Good evening.
Nice to see you all this evening.
Thank you.
As we talked about earlier, we've had very generous donations to our Wilmington Tree Initiative, and tonight, as you can see, the ordinance would be making a supplemental appropriation of $68,400, which would be used for tree planting. We estimate that the funding be a Phase 1 funding, would be completed by February, and would probably, depending upon the contract, would be between 175 and 200 trees. And again, those would be warranty trees, 18-month warranty trees. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions from Aaron? Okay. Aaron, thank you. Way to go. We have a motion to approve by Councilmember O'Grady, second by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Rivenbark, second by Councilmember Spears. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to our next item, Benjamin, which is item 02, which is an ordinance appropriating $51,198 of unassigned fund balance from the general fund to replace diesel engine and transmission in 2 frontline fire apparatus. At this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Ms. Tony Caudle. Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Tom Robinson, our Assistant Fire Chief for Support Services, will overview this item.
Welcome, Tom.
Good evening. So this, the repairs that we're needing to make to one of our frontline engines and our frontline ladders were from 2 catastrophic internal parts failures, and they're not able to be rebuilt. We had to purchase brand new. Both of these apparatus are about 7 to 10 years in their life of a 20-year life period, so we're just requesting this money to be able to go ahead and purchase that engine and get those installed in these vehicles, put them back in service.
Okay, very good. Are there any questions for Mr. Robinson? Okay, thank you, sir. Any further questions from council? Hearing none, what are the wishes of council? We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Rivenbark, second by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Mr. Anderson, second by Councilmember Rivenbark. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to item 03, which is an ordinance making a supplemental appropriation to the Traffic Engineering Street Light Materials account in the amount of $22,057 for monies received from 2 insurance claims for damages to city property. At this time, I'm going to recognize Councilmember Rivenbark, and then we have a question from Tony Caudle, our city manager, and then Mr. Rivenbark. I'm sorry about that, guys. It's been a long night, last 2 days. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Dennis Vilkenowitz, our city traffic engineer, will overview this item, but Mr. Rivenbark, do you have a question first?
Yes, sir. This is going to the streetlight materials account. Why is it going to that account? Was the accident involving utility poles or?
Mr. Vilkenowitz will overview that for us.
He nodded yes. So you certainly, does the 22,000 cover our entire cost?
Correct. Yeah, the cost of labor and materials to replace the poles.
Okay. Came from their insurance carriers?
Correct. Yep.
Thank you, sir. That's all I wanted to know.
Is there anything else?
No, I believe you got us covered there. Okay. What are the wishes of council in respect to this item? We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Barnett, second by Councilmember O'Grady. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Spears, second by Councilmember Rivenbark. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to our next item of business, which is a resolution, item 04A, which is a resolution officially accepting public streets and storm drainage facilities within the Woodlands Landing. And then we have item 04B, which is an ordinance establishing the speed limit of 25 miles per hour along Chastain Drive and Midvale Drive. At this time, I'd like to recognize the city manager, Mr. Tony Caudle. Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Rob Gordon, our plan review engineer, will overview the item with regard to street and storm drainage facilities, and Mr. Vilkenowitz is here to answer questions about the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Before you is a resolution to authorize official acceptance, streets and drainage infrastructure associated with the Woodlands Landing Apartments project. The project is located within the Track 3A of the Woodlands at Echo Farms project, adjacent to Echo Farms Park. The roads and easements proposed for acceptance are shown on Exhibits A and B in your packet, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions, staff? Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, what are the wishes of the council in respect to the resolution? We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Rivenbark, second by Councilmember O'Grady. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. Let's go to the item 04B, which is ordinance establishing the speed limit of 25 miles per hour. What are the wishes of council in respect to that ordinance? Motion made by Councilmember Anderson, second by Councilmember O'Grady. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes, second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to our next item of business, which is item 05A, which is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with the North Carolina Department of Transportation to update the Walk Wilmington Comprehensive Pedestrian Plan. And then item 05B, which is an ordinance making the supplemental appropriation in the amount of $71,250 from the City of Wilmington's general fund to update the Walk Wilmington, a comprehensive pedestrian plan. At this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Tony Caudle. Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mike Kozlowski, our MPO Executive Director, will overview both these items for us.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. The North Carolina Department of Transportation provides matching funds to complete bicycle and pedestrian plans around the state. Walk Wilmington, a comprehensive pedestrian plan, was adopted in 2009 and is now outdated. On May 18, 2021, City Council authorized the city to apply to NCDOT for the 2021 Bicycle and Pedestrian Planning Grant funds to update this plan. NCDOT estimates the total cost of the plan updated in the amount of $142,500 and awarded the city $71,250. The ordinance before you tonight appropriates these funds from the city's general fund. Upon execution of the agreement, the city would submit payment in the amount of $71,250 to NCDOT. NCDOT proposes to assign the plan development to Alta Planning and Design, which is also a city-approved vendor for on-call transportation planning services. Passage of the ordinance and resolution are recommended, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any question for Mr. Kozlowski? Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate it. What are the wishes of council in respect to the resolution 05A? We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Barnett, second by Councilmember Rivenbark. Any discussion? All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. Let's go to the item 05B, which is the ordinance making the supplemental appropriation of $71,250. What are the wishes of council in respect to the ordinance? Motion to approve by Councilmember O'Grady, second by Councilmember Spears. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Spears, second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to our next item of business, which is our resolutions. Item R1 is a resolution to update the official brick and stone streets policy map. At this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Tony Caudle. Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Dave Mays, our Director of Public Services, will overview this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. In 2016, City Council approved a policy for preserving and rehabilitating our brick and stone streets. That policy requires that we bring updates to that map back to you to approve those updates by resolution. Subsequently, after 2016, you approved budgets with capital investment in improving these brick streets. The updates that we're presenting to you tonight are a direct result of that investment. Red Cross from 3rd to 6th, South 13th from Dock to Orange, and St. James Street from Dock to Orange were all had asphalt on top of the brick, and we've stripped that off to restore it back to a brick surface. The map that's on the screen right now is an overview of all of the progress that we've made since 2016. The green areas show the locations of progress that we made before the last map update. The blue areas represent the areas that we're representing in this resolution. And the yellow areas are the next 3 blocks that we hope to do with the brick strength funding that we have right now with the new capital project that we will put forth. The one other update that's a part of this is to remove 1 block of Orange Street from 12th to 13th that we believe was originally placed on the map in error. We, in preparation to potentially go and restore that street, we cored it and found no evidence of bricks there, which is why we are suggesting that it be removed from the map. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions of Dave? Mr. O'Grady?
Not a question, but a compliment. It's just, it shows a lot of progress, and it's really heartening to see that we protect our history. Thanks.
Yes, yes, sir.
Anything else? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay. What are the wishes of council in respect to the resolution? We have a motion to approve by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes, second by Councilmember O'Grady. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously. Item R2 is a resolution of the City Council of its intent to close an unimproved portion of the Washington Street right-of-way in the city of Wilmington, North Carolina. At this time, I'd like to recognize our City Manager, Mr. Tony Caudill. Mr. Caudill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Brian Chambers, our interim deputy planning director, will overview this item.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is a resolution of intent to close an unimproved portion of Washington Street between 2326 and 2374 Carolina Beach Road. This is located on the Starway Flea Market site. It includes approximately 520 feet in length, about 0.16 acres. If this intent to close resolution is approved, the item will be scheduled for your January 4th City Council meeting, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Sir, Mr. Rivenbark.
Brian, is the portion just north of the green rectangle that's outlined in black, we see all the boats and cars parked in it, is that also Washington Street?
That is part of the right-of-way, yes.
Has that ever been closed?
No, sir.
Okay. Why don't we?
The city hasn't pursued it, and it would be up, unless the city pursued it, the applicant would have to pursue it and get the adjoining property owners all sign the petition and submit that application to staff.
And this instance is no different than the others. Half of the property will go to the people that front Carolina Beach Road. The other half will go to the owners of the flea market.
It's no different in that it will go to the adjoining property owners, but the same person owns all the same property.
Good.
So.
Thank you.
Ms. Haynes?
Just to make sure we all understand this, this is necessary in order to do the project which we've already approved, the affordable housing project here on the Starway. I mean, their plan looked like it needed this space here, and then this, I don't know if it's some sort of trade-off from the road on the south side of the Starway Flea Market. Could you speak to any of that?
Yes, this would allow for the redevelopment of the site. This would be a constraint on the redevelopment. They would have to avoid the right-of-way. So it would prohibit what is intended for the future use of this. I don't know that it would be considered a trade-off for the future right-of-way. We look at these independently because there's no guarantee that that road would ever come through. It would basically, we'd have to evaluate this closure on itself, on its own merits. It doesn't connect to the south. It's unimproved. It really serves no purpose being there. So that's why staff would be, as you'll see in January, recommending approval of the closure.
So that's the terminus of Washington Street, that southern tip. That's it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I mean, there is no more Washington Street south of there.
That is the end of the right-of-way.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
If I could just interject, Wilmington and New Hanover County are very old. We go back and date prior to the Declaration of Independence. We have what we call paper streets, old right-of-ways that maybe 200 years ago were used, but they haven't been used since then. They were never improved. Sometimes they've been dedicated, sometimes they haven't. Staff tends to run across this fairly regularly. In fact, council just helped a property owner out off of the Summer Rest Road. Once these paper streets are there and recorded, they do block people. They cause setback issues. This is another example of that. This is a paper street that it does hold up the use of the property. Staff always carefully looks at these, sees if there's any utility for that street, for the city, for any public use. When there's not, then we try to bring that to you so that it can be released, so that property owners can make the full and best use of their property. And I think that's exactly what this would do.
Okay. All right. Just to clarify something that Mr. Chambers alluded to, this will be based on our first meeting. We're going to hear this in our first meeting in January. Since we have not adopted the new calendar, we cannot use January 4th as that official date, but we'll look at it as being the first meeting in January, which will be the January the 4th, but since we have not adopted it as of yet, I have to be technical and say that.
Right. I will defer to council as to how we word that.
Yeah.
Typically, we
Just say
identify the
first-
date. If we
yeah.
just say the first meeting,
in
I'll defer to
January.
council if that's appropriate.
First meeting in January, which if I was a betting person, I would say that's the date we're going to use, but since we haven't adopted it,
Yes,
we
sir.
have to go there.
We have to put, for the public notice, we have to put the precise date.
That's correct. Okay, thank you. So we'll just say first meeting in January, whatever that date is. Is that good, Mr.
For this item, we need the precise date because it's a public notice that by statute has to be published. We have to tell people when
I
that
understand.
public hearing will be held.
Madam Clerk? We have to go back over to you. So come on.
Of course, the city attorney is correct, but because unless you want to do it now, to establish that as being the date, then that's fine, because I have to run the ad in the paper, and I have to be specific on the date certain. So I think council needs to say, regardless of how the calendar is adopted, that this is the date that this
Okay.
item will come back to you.
Regardless of whatever the date is adopted?
Yes,
this is
sir,
the date
and we'll
that-
make sure it's noted when you get your calendar.
Okay, very good. So we'll just say January 4th then. Okay? Very good. Everybody's okay. All right, thank you. Thank you. All right, what wishes the council in respect to the resolution? We have a motion approved by Councilmember Rivenbark, second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item passes unanimously. That brings us to our next item of business, which is item R3, which is a resolution adding special legislation for regulation of historic buildings outside of the local historic districts to the city's legislative agenda. This is sponsored by Councilmember Kevin O'Grady. At this time, I'd like to recognize our city, well, I'm going to recognize Mr. O'Grady. Well, I recognize Mr. Caudle. Mr. Caudle?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Christine Hughes is the staff member who will overview this item for us. But Mr. O'Grady, do you have any preliminary comments?
I think we had two speakers tonight that covered it excellently. Essentially, this is really trying to restore something we used to have, which was the ability to forestall demolition of historic assets for a period of 1 year. And it's a cooling off period. It's a period of time when either historic organizations or the city can try to work with property owners to save contributing structures. A number of cities have local laws which permit them to do this. We would have to go through the legislature to get this authority. And I think, and if I make any mistakes, Christine will correct me. And what this is bringing the resolution from the HPC to us for us to adopt that. This process will go forward so that in the spring, when we have our legislative breakfast, this can be part of our legislative agenda.
Okay.
There'll be no action until then.
Mr. Avamar?
And just to be clear, from Monday morning, which seemed like a year ago, this would come back before council before it actually becomes part of.
Yes, sir.
our code.
This would be enabling legislation that would allow the local government to adopt its own ordinance. It would have to go through the regular public hearing process.
Good.
Where it would be heard at the Planning Commission as well as the City Council.
Thank you very much.
Did I get an email or something from Don about this? Yeah, from Don. Was that the same thing? Okay.
There was an email that came out late this afternoon where a member of the public, I believe it was a member of the Home Builders Association, Realtors, thank you, I apologize.
Okay, and were they saying for us to wait on this? Or?
They were asking for a delay so that they could do some outreach into the community, but that will be up to you.
Is that a good idea?
Well,
I'm asking.
that was my concern. That's why I asked the question.
Right.
I mean, between now and whenever this comes back to us, I mean, there's your downtime. I mean, they can get nothing. I mean, this is not going to be written in stone until.
No, sir. This will have to go as a request as a part of our legislative agenda, which will then be forwarded to our legislative delegation at the next assembly of the legislature, which will occur in May, I believe, of next year. So there is a 6-month window in there. And then if you have the authority granted by the state, then you'd have to go through that public hearing process to it.
So I guess what I'm saying to Chris Bullitt, if he's watching, he's got all the time he needs to do what he would do, just as though we were going to postpone it. Did that make any sense? It didn't sound good to me, but.
Sains?
I think also there's, perhaps we need to do some educating about what it really is, because it's not some wild, comprehensive thing that keeps people from doing anything. It's very limited. Even if it did pass, which we're just asking the General Assembly to give us the permission to be able to at least consider this. So as Mr. Rivenbark said, there'll be public hearings and plenty of time to try to figure this out. But I hope that we could educate the public at the same time as to the benefits of this type of legislation.
Mr. Grady?
I would just echo that. There's going to be plenty of time for you all to think about this. What we're doing now is getting it on the agenda so we can start putting together more details on what we'd be asking for, using other cities as an example. And we have to persuade the legislature to pass that, and then it would come back, and a future council will get to consider whether to approve it at that time. And I can't believe that in the end, the realtors would oppose saving historic structures that are contributing. I mean, that's part of the beauty and the value of living in Wilmington, is that historic area.
Okay.
You all have covered everything. Mr. O'Grady and Mr. Cottle covered everything. This resolution would add the item to your legislative agenda. It was adopted by the Preservation Commission, as you know, and it would require a future amendment to our land development code should the special legislation be adopted by the state.
Okay.
And I want to add, the only reason I brought it forward was because it came from the HBC. There isn't really a way for them to bring things to us, so it's here.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay, what are the wishes of council in respect to the item? We have a motion to approve by Councilmember O'Grady, second by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item passes unanimously. This concludes the regular agenda. If any items be brought forward by our city attorney.
All I would like to do is extend my congratulations to all of those candidates-elect, incumbent and non-incumbent alike.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cottle?
Ditto to what the attorney said, Mr. Mayor. Nothing else.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk? Thank you. Mr. O'Grady?
Yes, congratulations to all those who were successful. I can't tell you how pleasant it was to not be standing on the edge of my seat last night.
Wow. Yeah. Ms. Barnett?
I can tell you it wasn't pleasant. I know. I want to just take a moment to thank the citizens of Wilmington who took the time to vote, the effort and the energy to vote. One of the neat things about being out there was just meeting people. And I had the privilege of meeting, for example, Dave Mays' mother. And I was going to say that before he left, but I wanted to make sure he give a shout out to his mother. Also had the opportunity to meet some kids who were voting for the very first time. And then the last shout out I want to give is to a young lady by the name of Mrs. McDella Washington. Mrs. McDella Washington was 98 years old, and she had been voting since, I think, 1967. And she took the time to vote. And so I think that's just commendable. And lastly, I want to thank those who have put the confidence in me to serve another 4 years. I am honored, and I appreciate the confidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Well, I too want to congratulate the mayor and Mr. Rivenbark and Mr. Barnett, and look forward to welcoming our new member, Mr. Waddell. I do want to say that I think it's sort of the band is back together again, and that it shows confidence that the public has in this council and what we have accomplished over the years. And just, again, congratulations.
Thank you. Mr. Rivenbark?
Well, the other people that to be congratulated are the other people that ran. Philip White's in our audience. Philip ran a very good, clean, informed campaign, as did the others. And Luke Waddell will be an outstanding, big shoes to fill from Mr. O'Grady. But I too don't want to be redundant, but the same things that Clifford said about the people that, so many people vote for you that you don't know. You don't know them, and they really don't know you, but they've perhaps watched on TV or whatever. And I don't think it's blind faith, but they had faith in us and put 2 incumbents back. And I would have to think that if Kevin O'Grady had run, all 3 of us would have been back. So that shows great confidence in what we're doing. And I think this council and the councils in the past have done great things for the city. And, it's easy to take pot shots at us, but look around. The city is doing very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson?
More of the same. I do want to commend and thank everyone that ran, because it's challenging, it's stressful on a lot of levels to put throw your hat in the arena and get out there and do your best to try to win. And the way this works, the majority of the people don't. So it's a very unique, winner take all election. So, but I too want to congratulate Clifford, Charlie, and Bill, and look forward to working with them at least another 2 years, and look forward to working with Luke as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Spears?
I too want to congratulate you all for hard work. I mean, those voter numbers were up there. Nearly 10,000 votes for Mr. Luke Waddell. That's pretty impressive. I look forward to him coming to council. He actually called me today. Luke, I'll call you back tomorrow sometime. Charlie, Clifford, Bill, good work, hard work. I was a little bit disturbed by some of the smear ads that I saw, because I don't think that's really what we want in politics. By being a politician, I guess, it should be about the game. Shouldn't be about anything else. It should be about strictly politics. But, I don't know where we get it from. Maybe we get it from TV or wherever we get it from. But, I think it should be about what the game is about. But thanks for the people who came out and voted. And for those of you who stayed home and complained, you got to get in the game next time. So thank you.
Thank you. Finally, I'd just like to say to the citizens of this community, thank you. for allowing me to serve as your mayor for another 2 years. Alluding to what Councilmember Spears said, there was a case before the Supreme Court called Citizens United. And for those of you that are not aware of it, that gives opportunity to outside groups to be able to pour money into campaigns, the local campaigns even. And that's what happened in this particular campaign. Unfortunately, some folks said that we had done that, but I want to be very clear that I had nothing to do with that. This campaign was a clean campaign, and I intended it to be that way. Me and Mr. Peterson may have some differences of opinion on issues, but I've respected him in his positions as a senator and as a person that has served on the city council and as mayor, former mayor of the city. Saying all that, every election is about the future of your community, and the citizens of this community for a municipal election came out pretty strong yesterday. There was a lot of voices that we heard throughout the community on a range of issues, some that we have direct play in and some that we do not. This is a growing region of the state of North Carolina, one of the fastest growing regions in the state of North Carolina. And I want to be very clear that the growth that we are seeing in our community reflects what was happening in Wilmington. People like what's happening here, and people are moving to this region and to this area. But I also want to make very clear that the county of Brunswick is one of the fastest growing counties, not only in the state, but also in the nation, which grew at 35% in the last 10 years. Pender County grew at 25%, and the county of New Hanover grew at 15%. Remarkably, the city of Wilmington in the last 10 years has only grown at 1.25% a year. And for the first time last year, in 2020, the city of Wilmington grew at less than 1%. So the impacts that we are all feeling are coming from all over. We have to work together as a region, speak with a regional voice, especially on transportation issues that affect our community that the Department of Transportation has responsibility to play in. So I'm looking forward to doing that and working with all of the council members up here and continue to be a consensus builder. We have a lot of work to do, a growing region, a lot of excitement, a lot of job creation that's happening in our community, and I'm honored to be your mayor again, and I thank you very much for the opportunity to serve you in this office. With that, thank you for taking an interest in your government. We stand adjourned.